Right now. It's starting to record.
Well, hello everybody. I'm Shane Bivens with ChefsFridge and Vesuvius. ChefsFridge is a peer-to-peer technology, food sharing technology. And then Vesuvius, what we do is we just primarily try to get entrepreneurs together and try to help us influence the path forward in different communities around Indiana, primarily in the East Central Indiana region is where we focus. Now, what we're doing here today, this is an ideation session. This definitive statements and preparation were not required by anybody that's joined. As an ideation session, the ideals and concepts are going to be freely explored. Please understand, this is an unprecedented time. The views and the opinions expressed are fluid and they're still being formed. So anything that anyone says or anything like that, it is their current view and maybe the first time they're being asked these questions. So it's going to change and it's open to different interpretations, but it is right now just a discovery process of how are we going to go through this. So again, I'm Shane Bivens. And what I'd like to do really quickly is if we could kind of just go around to whoever wants to jump in and try to give a very brief introduction of who you are or what you represent. We'll start off with Corey there.
Yeah. I'm Corey Sharp, and I'm the director of Purdue Polytechnic in Anderson. And again, I'm just working with various stakeholders in the Madison County area and in East Central Indiana to help with COVID response in a variety of capacities. And so this is one of many things that we're doing. For example, we're also making PPE in our makerspace and a few other initiatives that we're working on in the community. And this issue kind of bubbled to the top of, how can the communities, as we looked at reopening, how can we work with each other? So I started to reach out to colleagues at Purdue Extension, and that's kind of how this went forward. I'm going to hand it over to Sean Kerrigan, who was a good friend of mine who posed some questions to me. So Sean, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Yes, be friend of Corey's, and now I don't know. I am Director of National Account Sales Development for Captive Air. We are a manufacturer of commercial kitchen ventilation systems and HVAC equipment. And we serve the nation with 6 plants across the country. Fortunately, during this, we have been able to keep all of our plants open and all of our people working. So we're always out there trying to help the food service industry because we serve it to a great deal with the number of customers we have in it.
Nice. I'll jump in. I'm Stuart Lowry. I am co-founder with Shane of ChefsFridge. And as he said, it's a peer-to-peer food technology startup. So we're trying to put refrigerated infrastructure into neighborhoods. And prior to that, kind of relevant experience, I worked for the Indiana Economic Development Corporation as a freelance creative consultant for the regional grants program. So I was able to travel the state to see best practices related to where they invested and help them think through where else they could invest with target of talent retention and growing local communities. So nice to meet and see you all.
Am I last up?
Sure.
My name's Scott Wise. I am previously the founder of Scotty's Brewhouse. Sold that in 2016 to a group that did a tremendous job of bankrupting it within 2 years. And I've pivoted now since and moved into 2 things. I moved originally into working with CBRE as the vice president of retail real estate. And I went back and bought my original location with a couple investors, the Scotties in Muncie, out of their bankruptcy for pennies. We had a really good deal until this new life experience that we're going through. I thought that the recession was going to be my true hard-hitting life experience. How do I get out of this? And we did survive that one. And I think that that's a testament to say that even in what we're going through now, unfortunately, the landscape is going to change for a lot of people. There's going to be probably a lot of restaurants that don't survive this, but there is an out. And I was just always taught in life that everything that you're given, good or bad, you take that as a learning lesson. I've had lots of punches, and I think the most important thing is to do good for your community, do good for the people around you. Remember that you got family and health, and just keep moving forward. And I think that we will all survive through this. It's just there's gonna be a little bit of a reckoning and some blood spilled, but I am proud to say that we are surviving and doing really well at Roots. And it's interesting for me to have the perspective from the national retail. I'm on several calls a day talking about what does this look like nationally for restaurants, not just mine. So it's almost like I have this secret intel of what's happening nationally. Not that there's any secret magic bullet to make you to get out of it, but there is a lot of good information that I get to soak up through there. And then doing what I do at Roots, it was something that I always told myself I was never going to get back. I spent 22 years of building Scotty's and a lot of blood, sweat, and tears, and I didn't want to have to go through all that again. But I'm so passionate about restaurants that I knew I wanted to do something just to stay connected with day-to-day operations. So I'm really blessed to have that one location that's almost like my my outlet, and then I've got my true career now, which is CBRE.
Well, I will introduce myself after Scott. I'm Chef Heather Peer. I actually am the program chair for Ivy Tech's Culinary, Hospitality, and Baking and Pastries Department in Muncie. And we actually cover 23 counties. So we're truly rural East Central Indiana. I have students that drive on an average of about 40 minutes one way. I have some that come all the way from south of Connorsville. So I have some that'll drive an hour and 40 minutes two ways. It's been a challenge to go from being in the kitchen 50, 60 hours a week with these students to being online. We've done some pretty amazing things. We've gone completely Zoom. The good thing is that I have always been a progressive person when it comes to making sure objectives are met. I want to meet objectives in the first 8 weeks. Those second 8 weeks are actually then building from the first objective. So we are always kind of a step ahead, and thank God we were a step ahead. So we have actually been teaching Zoom from our kitchens. My kitchen's right behind me. I spend a whole lot of time on the computer with all of my students. I think they're scared. They're getting a little bit better now that they have figured out kind of how things are going. Some of them are still working. We do have one that is COVID positive that I talk to every day. He's doing well, but was working in the industry, unfortunately. And then we are just kind of trying to help them through the time and tell them that there is another side, and we will come out of this, and there will be jobs to be had. And I was talking to a graduate, because I feel so bad for my seniors who are about ready to graduate and walk out into this world. And I told her, I said, you have to understand this is a new day, it's a new dawn, and it's a new opportunity. And so trying to keep them positive has really been what we as faculty are doing and trying to support them.
Okay, and would anybody else like to introduce themselves, or you can always still participate without doing an introduction?
Yeah, Adam Hooksema here from Bankable. We are a SBA lender and have a number of clients that are in food service, and so yeah, just kind of coming from that perspective of seeing a lot of clients going through challenges, doing what we can to help.
Thanks, Adam.
My name's Matthew Kaito, and I grew up in a family business here in town and managed that. We sold in 2017, and since then I've been teaching at University of Indianapolis, and I teach full-time over at Butler, operations, supply chain management, probably with a specialty in fresh food production and fresh food distribution and marketing.
I'll go ahead and chime in. So my name is Chelsea Hadaramil, and kind of as Corey was saying earlier, I work for the local Purdue Extension office. There's actually a few of us on the call today, and my job is actually to do policy systems and environmental changes, providing safe access to food and physical activity opportunities, even during the time of a pandemic. But the others on the call also provide direct education to help those who are in need of food and health and wellness and financials, do it in a safe and proper way during this time. So that's how we're trying to be involved with the community currently.
Okay. Well, so I know there's a couple more people that may be joining us while we're doing this, but we'll try to just roll with them when they do come in. But other than that, I wanted to go right toward a really hard question, and just let's get scared right away. So, what will be the impact of contact tracing and the potential of an employee or customer who gets COVID out and it's contact traced back to restaurants or to a specific eatery or a producer or a food source? What are you guys' kind of general sentiment or concerns that you have around that?
This is Betty Fang from Purdue Extension. So I'm a food safety specialist on campus. I wrote a couple of extension articles since the pandemic. So from what we know, based on the peer-reviewed journal articles, there is no published data showing that food or food packaging could be transport the virus. So what does that mean? That means currently there's not enough data showing we are worrisome about food, whether food can transmit virus or food packaging transmit virus is not supported. So does that mean it's not important to keep social distancing or to wear face masks and to keep the sick employees away from their working station? No. So that it still means that we still need to practice our best practices. So in microbiology or in this epidemiology world, public health world, there is no such thing called zero risk. We have to try our best still, practice those personal hygiene and enhance employee training to best protect our business as well as ourselves and our customers from the disease. So I will be happy to share with you some more food safety related COVID-19 materials from my website. I will share the website in the chat box.
Thank you so much. I'll make sure I share that as well when we put the video out there as well.
This is Sean. My initial thought on that question was lawsuits.
Yes.
And then I thought preventive measures might be such as taking customer and employee temperatures with video documentation showing that. So at the door, have a video of that to show that, yes, you were taking everyone's temperature coming in, and where the employees are coming in, the same thing. And then obviously check for insurance coverage and see if there's any to insulate you from those potential lawsuits.
So you're the perfect person to ask this. Are you aware of are there insurances in place or ones that people could how would you know if you're insured for something like this?
Well, I would check with my liability insurance coverage company just to see and make sure I expanded my search to see if I could find it. Because if you're opening a restaurant in this time that we will be, probably phase 2, phase 3 of the openings, and you're going to have to make sure that you don't lose everything by having yourself out there. And I'm sure that the people who are currently serving, in pickup, they have some of those concerns as well, and they may have coverage. I'm not sure. but I haven't heard anything specific, Shane.
Yeah, I'm sure it'll be, similarly to force majeure and what's going on there with the courts. It's probably going to come up again with this. I don't think that there's any specific product liability or liability insurance for it, but it sure is a slippery slope. And as somebody who would look at that, it would be hard to prove definitively if, somebody got sick, that they got sick at your restaurant.
Yeah.
However, if you're McDonald's and you got deep pockets, I would be very nervous if I were McDonald's or one of the fast food chains or Chipotle or someplace where there's a high touch.
Scott?
Well, let me put another scenario in there. So let's say there's been local movie theaters who have been almost completely shut down by claims of people finding bed bugs, right? So it's just claims. There's no proof. And most of them have been checked and there wasn't any bed bugs, but it was something that was used as someone to try to sue, or something where just somebody was trying to start a rumor. With COVID, there's a high likelihood that those things would occur too. And, is there anything that a restaurant can do to kind of get ahead of any of those types of things?
I think putting up the disclaimer that you're doing everything that's reasonable and possible, and listing those points out when you enter the door. I mean, at some point, we're going to leave our houses and we're going to have to make decisions if we want to put gas in the car without a glove on. And it's going to be up ultimately to the customer to make those decisions, but it's up to the supplier to make sure that they make those policies known so that we can make a better decision.
Scott, this is Corey Sharp. Have you seen anything nationally from some of the conversations, in either in terms of insurance or something along those lines, those discussions?
I haven't seen anything from an insurance standpoint. I think this mimics, a lot of it, where obviously this is a new experience or a new, pandemic for all of us, but it reminds me a lot of, I don't want to say it's no different. It's much more different, much scarier and much worse. But, I know restaurants that have an employee with hepatitis that has had to completely clean their entire restaurant. One of them locally, there was a Muncie restaurateur that had a restaurant in southern Indiana that I read about that had to go through the same experience. And I think the employee was even fired or terminated before once they found out that they had hepatitis, they had to close it, sanitize the entire restaurant. And once that public image is out there, it's like the bed bugs example you just gave. I think any of these situations can lead to any kind of bad PR, and I don't even want to say bad PR because it's just bad health standards. But I think what this is eventually, what this is going to do is heighten all of us to make our restaurants even cleaner. I think we already operate in a world where people are trusting us to cook their food, serve their food, take their payment, take their credit cards away from them, and go process them somewhere else. That was a whole nother conversation. So we're all, our industry has been rife with possibilities for all kinds of different types of contaminations, scams, things like that. So I think you've got your local board of health. So I think that's one area where we're going to have to rely on, is that the national level, coming down to the state level, coming down to city, local government, that our board of health are going to have to do an even better job of helping us monitor and mandate what kind of procedures go on in our restaurants. I think the good part about all of this is that restaurateurs, for the most part, I think most, are clean people that know they have to run a very well organized, detailed, cleaned operation. And all this is doing, this what we're going through right now is magnifying all of that, right? So now we're having to say that tables might have to be 6 feet apart, and servers might have to come to the table with masks on and gloves on. We've got all these, because no one really knows. No one knows exactly, the professor or whomever just spoke. For the last week, I've been watching the news, and I hear about people that are bringing in boxes from Amazon and using Lysol and bleach to clean the box, then taking off their gloves and throwing away the gloves. And we can take this to some kind of crazy level, but is it crazy or not? Like, none of us know exactly I can't say none of us know. Me being just the idiot restaurateur, I don't know. I know that a lot of people are still trying to figure out the disease and how it moves and travels and everything else. So I guess long-winded answer to your question is there are a lot of levels that this is going to go through. I think we're already in an industry that takes really good care of our patrons because we know that health and safety and sanitation are always on top of mind. This is just elevating it to a whole new level that we're all going to have to be cognizant of. And I think the insurance is one. People can sue for anything they want. We've been over the years, somebody tripped on something outside of the restaurant and now it became my fault because they weren't quite to the door, but they tripped on something else. So now I'm getting sued for it. The McDonald's example is a good example. Anything with anybody with deep pockets, this could go back to them. But it also reminds me of, when you get a claim of food poisoning, it's really hard to tell if a restaurant, if something has happened where you've had an outdated item that has got somebody sick. But how do you pin that when they've had 4 different meals and it takes a certain amount of time for that to digest? How do you know where that liability lies? And so the same thing is going to happen, I think, with COVID, is how do we know one specific restaurant or one specific employee is going to be responsible for that? And it's going to be, a lot of this onus is going to be on us as owners to say, I've got to make sure I'm taking the temperature maybe of my restaurants, my employees for a while. I need to make sure that they are gloved up and they do have masks. There's going to be some precautions that we have to take, but it's the new normal that all of us are in.
Yeah, I want to make a comment based on what Scott said too about the payments, because I think as a consumer, that's interesting to me. They're cleaning our cards. You're being told not to use cash. A number of places I'm going, they have the screens up, and it's interesting. I'd love to hear the comments on that. That's one of the areas with Ripple and Bitcoin. There might be some different things that come into the marketplace that weren't there before. I'm wondering, related to both logistics payments or payments on site, how you see that might be changed in the rollout phase.
Now we're asking the hard questions. So we got some silence going on there. So anybody that's on the call that has any opinion on this is just an ideation session. You don't have to be a recognized expert in the field to have an opinion on how you see as maybe a solution to this, or maybe just even a question or concern that you have in your own dealings.
Are we talking about the phased rollout now?
Yeah, I think we could roll into that. I think this is a good segue into that. We could still keep coming back to that. What happens when through contact tracing? But yeah, let's start going through the phased rollout. Like, what do we see? What do you want to bring up in there?
Well, just a summary of ideas. We feel it's going to be a challenge. It'll have a severely negative impact on profit. Obviously, employment and supply chain will be issues. Costs will be initially higher per diner for rent, utilities, supplies. Limited new openings are going to be happening, or I should say there will be limited new openings of restaurants and less mom and pop. And that's, the heart and soul of the restaurant industry, but less mom and pop because of the expenses to comply with standards. And, but the positive side of that is I see that customers are going to come if they know it's safe. It's just like Disney World looking at the planned rollout, and when they get to phase 2, they can start opening up some of their parks. And then phase 3 will be much different and many more people. But the people won't come if they find a violation or they find issues that have happened. So you really have to be protective up front going up to the tracing side. So safety compliance, I think, will have to be verifiable, and it'll have to be posted just so you can get people to walk in once you take that step of reopening.
I'll jump in real quick. This is Scott Wise. First on the, real quick, I'll go back to the payments since no one jumped in on that. I totally agree with you that I think some type of cashless payment, whether we're using Apple Pay or, I only know Bitcoin enough to be dangerous to even say the word Bitcoin. I think that, but you're going to find, I think there were a lot of restaurants that were pushing that pre-COVID, where we were trying to say, well, let me back up. They were going two different directions. Some restaurants were going pure cash to avoid basically the fee that you pay to a credit card company. I think now this whole thing has kind of got put on its head, because we know that cash can be dirty, but same thing with a card. I don't know, we've got the ability with our iPhones or any kind of phone to bump payments. So I think that's something that we're kind of seeing. Something at Roots that we did through all of this, as we're taking orders to the car to try to reduce the public and keep the distancing in place, is we bought a reader so that we could take credit card payments out of the cars, so that the guests could actually put their card. I think two things that does is, one is just safety, for me to not run away with your card and do whatever I want to do with it, make a duplicate copy of it or whatever else. But it also allows the customer to process their payment. And in fact, I was just in a Subway the other day, and they didn't want to take the card. They wanted me to run my card at the cash register, which I totally understood. So I think that to your questions on cash payment versus credit, I think you're definitely going to see a change there. To pivot now to talk about a little bit about the rollout and how that all looks. First, I'll say that in the national calls that I've been on with CBRE, not to scare everybody, but number one, mom and pops are the lifeblood, as we know, of the restaurant industry. And unfortunately, they're the ones that are going to suffer the most, because their pockets aren't as deep. They're the ones that aren't getting the $20 million in PPP funding like Roots Chris just got. So I think you're going to see, well, from what we're being told, we potentially will lose 20% of the entire nation's restaurant mom and pop owners from what's going on. Now, that's a projection. Whether that'll happen or not, I have no idea. But I know that's one of several negatives that's going to come out of this. From there, I don't know the rollout. I've seen and heard lots of different things. Like I think I alluded to earlier, the wearing masks, tables 6 foot apart, only a certain amount of percentage of occupants allowed in your restaurant. So what's awful about this situation is it goes from, I don't want to say bad to worse, but bad to badder, if that was a word. That we're going to go from a situation that's terrible to a slow ramp up, where a lot of mom and pops, or even some of and I don't want to say it's just mom and pops, because we've seen the filings from Bravo Brio, we've seen Punch Bowl Social now claiming bankruptcy, and that's just the tip of the iceberg. So you're going to have those things happen, and I think that it's just it's going from where we are, we'd like to, I think, go from 0 miles an hour to 100 miles an hour. And that's not I think we're going to see probably a bad example. I hope it's not the case, but I think what's happening in Georgia, where they're opening things back up on Friday of this week. I was just on a national call this morning with CBRE, and they said that the worst thing that could happen in this crisis is that we open things back up and then we have to shut back down again because we have a spike in people getting sick again. So I think from our standpoint, but I also know that, and I know a lot of these, we're kind of all at this point where we need to get back out and work. Everybody does. And God bless you that the hood maker, the exhaust hoods, that you're still going. Those are the economies or those businesses that are still going through this and being able to keep people employed and keep producing their products. God bless everything that you got going on. I think for me in general with Roots, we're doing everything we can just to keep the 10 people we have right now employed. And I guess the good part about what the government is doing with the additional funding they're giving for unemployment, what the newest article I just read this morning was, it's more advantageous for our restaurant employees to stay unemployed and collect unemployment than it is to come back to work. And I think that's going to be this crazy sword that we're going to have to try to figure out which edge we want to be on, because come June, if I want my PPP money to be forgiven, I've got to have a certain amount of percentage of my staff back on payroll. So I'll shut up because I'm talking way too much, but I kind of wanted to diarrhea out all that stuff to you.
I'm glad you did. I think we all are.
Sorry, terrible analogy to use at the end too.
Does anyone
Well,
have any comments specifically around the phased rollout?
Well, I was curious to see what Matt's reaction was. With a 20% loss in restaurants, Matt, what logistically with the supply chain, where's the hit there, and where kind of in the rollout phase are they going to need the most Band-Aid?
No, it's going to be interesting. Everything's, I'm going to keep using the word interesting. It's interesting to watch. So if you're a big food service distributor, Cisco, GFS, anybody like that, you're going to run into quite a few problems. First of all, your sales are down right now about 50%, which means that the whole supply chain's backed up. And we've just lost 6 weeks worth of shelf life. So, if you're in the restaurant business, one of the first things I'd look at once things start going is what are the sell-by dates? Somebody's going to have to eat that loss. The other thing is the whole supply chain's gotten out of kilter where not only is food service down, but retail is up. Retail's up 50% right now because let's face it, we were all eating out of our house 50% of the time. Now we're eating in the house. So, in my former life where we wholesaled to retail grocers, recessions were good for us because when the economy's bad, people eat at home more. This situation's probably good for them now. But the whole supply chain is really messed up. And I can't say anything more academically than that. I've talked to people across the country, Washington State. I talked to a couple truck brokers today. Anybody who's been a marginal player for the last 5, 6, 7 years is going to go out of business. There's just not enough cash there. So if you're in the business now, you've got to preserve your cash. You got to go start leaning on your suppliers, either for better terms or more lenient terms. You're going to have to focus on ways that you get you partner up with people. And partnering is not the right word, but if it's a matter of survival, you need to go to your suppliers and say, hey, look, it's a matter of survival. I paid my bills in the past. I expect to pay my bills in the future, but I'm having a hard time right now. Can I get extra terms? If I pay quickly, can I get a discount? Anything like that. Do I need 4 deliveries a week? Can I get by with 2 deliveries a week? Everything's on the table right now. And the way I look at it with my students, and I talked to somebody earlier today, it's a matter of survival. It's not a matter of what you want to do. It's a matter of what you have to do with your people. Another interesting concept that I've heard floated recently is, now's the time where you might want to go to some of your people. You're starting to see some of the larger companies do this where they cut back on salaries. You might want to go to your people and say, look, we may not be able to give you full-time hours, but we can still keep you on benefits because it'll make a lot of sense for people to work for benefits, or as long as you're protecting my benefits and you're giving me a reasonable amount of hours where I can keep food on the table and just cover my bills. It's, if you could look all the way through the value chain, it's all about survival right now. And the scary part is we don't know how long this is going to be because our short-term forecasts are out the window, long-term forecasts are out the window. And if you look at past pandemics, even when you go back, what's going to happen in the fall? There's probably going to be another run, or if you look at the global pandemic 100 years ago, there were 3 runs and each one got worse. So I'm not saying that's going to happen, but if you're a public official right now, that's what you really got to weigh. We're not out of the woods yet. Even when we go back to work, we're not going to be out of the woods for a long time.
I'm going to ask, that's a point. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
No, you're fine. I was just going to piggyback a little bit off of what Matt said about the supply chain. We are actually looking statewide right now we have 7 campuses that do culinary and baking, and we are looking to do mass buying because, we've always supported local, and we've already had a couple of local people just can't supply. Whether their supply chain is, dried up or they've sold out because they're selling to grocery stores and smaller places. I know our local farmers are absolutely inundated with requests for food. Muncie's kind of a food desert as it is. So you add food desert to supply chain problem, and you have, my pastry chef has her own business on the side, and she had to order butter from Webstaurant. It's the only place she could get it. She couldn't get it from anywhere. And so she found it online from Webstaurant in order just to fulfill what she's doing for others. So it's interesting that, the supply chain in my part of this worries me in order to make sure that we have what we need. And I think it also is worrying my colleagues in the four-year schools to feed when they come back. I mean, where are we going to be in that supply chain?
Those are good points, Heather. Good points. Um, I was going to ask Chelsea just quickly. Matt had talked a little bit about the pandemic and that it could come in multiple waves and the impact of that. Do you have any insight to that or any thoughts?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question? You kind of cut out a little bit.
Sorry. Yeah, no. Matt had mentioned just, the wave of the pandemic said it could happen in multiple phases, fall, maybe again in the spring of next year. Just any insight to that and how we should prepare for multiple waves of the pandemic and the impact that that's going to have on the food business in general? I'm sure that you can.
Right now, we actually had a discussion about this today. We are being encouraged to look into the future. We are trying to get more data on that and what that is going to look like for us. Quite a few, especially like government officials, have been requesting that, like, what can we do ahead of time to prepare for what it might look like, maybe next spring or next fall. I would kind of agree with, I'm sorry, I can't remember her name, the Purdue Extension specialist that was speaking earlier, is that there's not enough data yet to really be able to assume what that could look like right now. We're still in the process of finding that. DeMarcus, do you have any additional insight from health and human sciences side of things?
No, that's a tough question. I think it's pretty hard to predict what that'll look like. That's part of the reason why I try to invite a few experts from campus that might be a little more familiar with uh, what that would look like for folks. But yeah, I do not have any additional insights to give folks on that.
I think the problem with looking too far into the future right now, like everyone said, we're all worried that this thing is going to spring back up in some form, mutated, stronger, who knows what. And I think a lot of restaurants, mine especially being one that's on a college campus, we don't know is, already some schools now going to be online. What's going to happen in the fall? What's happening with sports in general for a restaurant that has a lot of TVs and operates kind of out of not just my restaurant, but a lot of restaurants are a gathering point for people to get together and socialize and maybe watch a game together. And now without having that component, so you got those two strikes. The third strike is, as I was kind of talking about earlier, that you've got this ramp up of business. And then you've got these situations right now where people are taking for rent abatements. Some people are not paying the rent at all. Some of a landlord has said, you know what, we'll give you 3 months of free rent, but we're going to tack those on for the remainder of your lease. All that does to that restaurant owner is now make their occupancy cost even higher in an industry where we're already on thin profit margins and making pennies. And now our occupancy cost now has just gone up. So you're going to see that situation arise. You're going to have a fallout of all these different restaurants. You're having a lot of landlords that can't afford to pay their mortgages because the restaurants and other retailers are not paying their rent. So you've got this really bad, we've talked about now the supply chain. Now you're talking about all these ancillary businesses and people that are affected by this thing. Once we even get out of what the situation we're in, and now I don't even think we can predict what it's going to look like in September, October, November, December, because I think right now a lot of restaurants are just saying, man, I hope I can get to May 1st, or I can hope I can get to June 1st. So, I think it's a really tough thing to call because of all these situations.
This is Jody Ellett. I'm at Indiana University with the Sustainable Food System Science Group, and I just wanted to talk to a few points. I think the lack of widespread testing either for live virus or those who have already had COVID-19 is a huge factor in issues like liability and waves of isolation. So until there's really widespread testing and research like they've done in Germany, I don't see that we would have any definitive information to actually have these phased openings. And second, in terms of supply chains, revisiting what's available locally and even working to find things locally. I've got 4 people that I work with on a regular basis that work sort of throughout the state. They're called value chain coordinators, and they help people who need locally grown, raised foodstuffs. We focus on institutional and wholesale purchasing of foods, and so thinking about reconnecting local supply chains, it offers a lot of resilience for community food systems. And the USDA has recently announced, and today I was on a webinar, that they're going to spend at least $3 billion buying food from producers who can box it up for sort of nonprofit food distribution organizations. And I think this will bring a lot of growers out who have been serving restaurants, who have that level of product, and sort of, bringing those people to the table and working with the distributors of the world, and in our local distribution system, maybe the Piazza or folks that are able to take on that challenge and create those boxes that food banks are looking for. And that could have a positive impact on future wholesale purchasing in the state.
So I was saving my positive statements till the end, but I do want to, like, kind of coming from an entrepreneurial perspective, I help a lot of businesses get started. I help a lot of businesses grow very rapidly. That's kind of been my history. And identifying trends is something that is very key to me being able to do what I do. And looking at the trends of the past of when things like that, we haven't had anything exactly like this occur with the way that we currently are structured as an entity the United States is. But looking at what happens after these things, when businesses fail, when restaurants go away, and the new entrepreneurism that comes out of that, and the new innovations that come out of that, when you have a space where it still has the menus on the table, it's just the owner did not make it through, and now you've got a new person that wants to come in. So then what that brings in is people like Adam and people like Clayton and other people on the call we're really going to need to stick around those groups, because we're going to have a lot of brand new entrepreneurs that we really need to support as they're first time trying to do a restaurant, and they've taken on a known location that that now they're going to need a lot of support, and they're most likely they're not going to get the type of support they would have gotten in the past, because there's so much of a push toward helping the existing restaurants that I have a little bit of concern about. Are we going to be effective at helping the new people that are coming into the space, the ones who, however you look at it, the ones who see that opportunity of an empty building with still the full kitchen in place, and staff that are still trained and ready to start working again? Well, just interested if anybody has any other comments around that opportunity and innovation that can occur in that scenario.
Yeah, this is Adam. I could jump in a little bit about what we're thinking from a lender's perspective. I mean, it is tough. We had been thinking about a loan product to help restaurants and just businesses in general kind of reboot when they're able to reopen. We assume that they're kind of draining all their working capital right now just to survive, and that they probably are going to need a little bit of funding to get some inventory, get pay the first couple weeks of payroll, and we'd like to be able to help with that, and so we're kind of thinking through that. But I think the risk there's a lot of risks there, but one of our biggest concerns is that unknown of does this thing reemerge? And we help them reboot for a month or two. They're just starting to kind of get back to normal operation, or the new normal of operation, and then are forced to shut down again and are put back in the same spot. And that reboot funding that we provided is, we're just going to have to do it again. And so, I think that's a real challenge. I think from the lending, every lender is going to be thinking about those things and worrying about those things. And I think the result is it is going to be hard to find funding for, like you said, new restaurants or just existing restaurants that are trying to reboot.
So Adam, how would you, if the IEDC came in to help with that and maybe took the regional grant program concept but flipped it so it was a lot more help and rather than just a match, what kind of scale up do you see would need to happen statewide from what you're seeing in the piece you're handling now? Do you have any kind of ballpark numbers or ballpark? You said weeks, but I think Scott would probably jump in and say they need months of support. Do you have any parameters you could think of, just brainstorming what you would want IEDC to do?
IDC does have the capital access program that does provide some kind of loan insurance essentially to lenders, which is kind of a useful structure that's already in place. I think it's it's sufficient insurance in a normal environment, and so it would cover normal, expected defaults and whatnot. So with this, it's just so hard. There's so much unknown that I guess what I would be thinking is fund more to that capital access program to be able to provide more insurance to lenders. But even if you think about PPP from the lender's perspective, and I'm assuming SBA probably didn't start out this way, wanting to do 100% guaranteed loans, but that's where they ended, probably because they talked to some lenders and said, we're not lending to anyone unless it's 100% guaranteed. So, I do think, you could fund some more into that IDC capital access program, and it would encourage some marginal lending probably.
And I saw John Taylor, you were unmuting there for a moment. I didn't know if you wanted to jump in on this topic especially as well.
Can you hear me?
Muted, but there we go.
There we go. I'm in the hospitality staffing business for hotels in about 30 states, and we got hit equally hard with about a 95% drop in business. But there are things that our largest client, Marriott, is doing to try and create the steps to make sure that their hotels are clean and so that they can give their guests the confidence to come back and stay in a hotel. So there are things that I think are a mirror for the restaurant industry. Over the past couple of years, I helped sponsor a couple of restaurants that were struggling as a mom and pop, and we had them outsource their employees to us in a staffing type arrangement, and it allowed us to give them 6 to 8 weeks of credit line where they had the chance to basically get a credit line on the factoring of their labor, which is something that's typical in the staffing industry. So it's somewhat natural for us to provide some credit if you've got a mom and pop that has a proven track record, and it helps them to get back into the game. We do our factoring with Wells Fargo, and they've pretty much given us a ability to provide a $50,000 credit to any client that we choose to operate with. We just got our PPP money based on about 1,400 average weekly employees. So that was a relief today. But I think there are a lot of restaurateurs and small businesses that I know that have not gotten that. And so we were able to provide a bridge through our factoring arrangement to the restaurant until they get their PPP money going forward. I'm not sure if that is clear to everybody, but it's something that I've been working on, and I don't know if it's scalable.
Okay. So along those lines of that, since especially with someone like John on the line and others on the line, and what was brought up briefly earlier was we're kind of jumping toward the end of our agenda, is those workforce challenges of people that are on unemployment, especially in the food service industry. Does anybody have any tips or anything of how you bring those people back out of that unemployment and back to work, with the unemployment being sometimes a pretty good and more stable thing than what they may see their old job as being? I hope Scott's still on the line. He might have some views on that.
I think Scott. I think Scott jumped off the call.
Okay.
I don't know. Is Heather still on? I was thinking maybe looking at students and things like that to maybe find talent.
Yeah, no, I'm still here. The thing is that before this happened, we couldn't fill the restaurant industry. Between in a 50-mile radius, we had 1,500 job openings that we could not fill. We could not get students out fast enough, and that was with 90% of our students working. So the workforce there, absolutely. I'm looking at numbers. I've been looking at numbers all day because that's what I do. I feel like, and we are up in summer already when it comes to students, and we are up in fall already. And that gives me a little bit of hope when it comes to where our future lies in these. And you have to understand, Muncie has the youngest demographic of any Ivy Tech in the state. We service 90% 18 to 20-year-olds. We don't know if that has anything to do with Ball State, but we have a lot of young kids. And we just built a brand new facility. We were in there a whole 8 weeks before we had to leave. It was horrible. I was just like, are you kidding me? We have this beautiful new facility. And we do the best for our students, but our students, they're resilient. And I think that they're ready to work now. I think that they would walk right off that unemployment job right back into where they want to be, because they want to be in those kitchens. They want to serve customers. The biggest thing that I can do for them every week when we talk about the videos that they're putting up for me of things that they're cooking in their homes is, why did you do it? Why do you want to be? What are you doing? So I think that their passion will hopefully drive them. I think that some of the old timers like myself, where I was in the business for 18 years before I started teaching in 2008. Thank you. I'm tired. But I have nothing but a sunshine hope for our future when it comes to those students who are looking to open their own businesses and are looking to get into the field and are running towards it. They are absolutely devastated to be at home. They want to be in the kitchen. They're used to being with us 25 hours a week and learning, and right now they're just kind of waiting. And so I think that they will be the first ones to probably jump out there and say, we're ready.
And I see we had a couple more people join us. I don't know if you guys were specifically talking about the unemployment and back to work, like how do we handle those scenarios? And Heather, thank you for providing some optimism in that as well. We need that. We need some optimistic statements and optimistic people out there because that's going to be kind of who gets us through that next stage.
I think that's all I have left. I think that I've cried enough that the optimism is all I have left, because the first 2 weeks of at home schooling was more like group therapy sessions. And hopefully we've now moved past that. And I'm putting up challenges for them, whether they're baking or whether they're culinary. What do you have in your kitchen? Give me 5 items, take a picture, do a video, and just challenging them. And the more I can challenge them, the better they feel, the better I feel. So I think that the optimism, there has to be a little bit, just a little bit.
Yeah.
Hey, Shane,
This
do you want to?
Scott Wise here.
Go ahead, Scott.
I was just going to. I'm sorry. My computer froze up. I could hear everybody, but I couldn't talk, which is probably a good thing. My computer was probably trying to shut me up. And I gotta just kind of piggyback on what was just said, because I totally believe when I made the comment earlier about how employees were basically satisfied right now with receiving unemployment because they're making more currently than they could working in the restaurant. That's only going to go until approximately June 1st right now. They don't get the extra $600 from the government forever, which makes it a little bit more feasible or not feasible, makes it more lucrative for them to not work than to work. But I would say, I think I compare this with the example that for the past 20 something years, as I was always I'd walk up to, somebody in the restaurant and say, you've got potential to be a great manager one day. And some would love that. And some would say, you know what, why would I ever want to take on the headaches of dealing with you, Scott, and the headaches of the customer when I can make more money bartending and leave when I clock out, I leave work at work and I don't take it home with me. And, for the longest time we'd have problems with that, but that's just kind of the way the industry is. I think for every one of those, there are 5 others that, with what was just said, that have passion for the industry. And those are the ones you have to find, the ones that see it as more of not a short-term gain. And I'm just here to kind of get me from A to B. I'm here because I like it and I want to be here for a while and I love this industry and I'm passionate about it. And I know money will come as I am good at what I do. I don't need to worry about it right now. And so I think that's what we all have to kind of, at least us that are truly in the industry, have to keep in our hearts, is that there are still people out there that love this industry and are passionate about it, whether you're a chef or you're a guy like me that just is an entrepreneur at heart and loves what I do and loves motivating and inspiring people to get the most out of them. And those are the ones that will get us through all this. Real quick, I'll pivot back to one question that was said about the restaurant that is unoccupied now and has tables and chairs, and what happens to that new naive person that comes up and says, I want to open a restaurant here. And I'd say 2 things. One, there's always going to be naive people that want to open a restaurant. And I've always, as I've taught at Ball State in the hospitality program these last couple of years, and kids always come up to me and say, I want to get in the restaurant business. And my first comment is, have you ever worked in a restaurant? Have you ever washed dishes? Do you actually know what it's like? Well, no, but I've got this really good idea. And I said, well, then just stop. Then give me a bucket of money and I'll take it from you and I'll make the pain a lot quicker and I'll take your money from you so you don't have to waste the next couple of years. So I don't go really that far into it. But I think the real point here is that through times like this, inspiration and creativity and American entrepreneurship at its heart is what comes out of this. There'll be people that will discover the vaccine to this virus. There'll be people that discover that you can work from home and not have to be around your kids. Although, like what was just said, e-learning is about ready to kill me. There are going to be all kinds of things that come out of this. And just the same in this industry, our rest of the landscape is going to change forever. People understand now carry out and delivery are not going away. And we're already talking in our industry about how small restaurants are going to get. And now casual dining figures out we need drive-through windows, not just Taco Bells and McDonald's of the world. And the other thing that I really love I'm actually even doing this I shouldn't say this because it's kind of supposed to be a secret, but I'll just tell all you guys in the recordings, and who knows how far this is going to go out. But most of you have probably heard the term ghost menus or virtual kitchens. These are kind of interchangeable terms. And I've been watching this for a long time, and I love it. And right now, and I wish I would have got on it 6 months ago when I was really getting into it. I'm a little bit behind, but we're going to launch our first ghost kitchen or virtual menu, which is basically using our current operations and creating a new fictitious restaurant that has no brick and mortar, but you can go onto DoorDash and Grubhub and Uber Eats, and you can order the menu, and you might say, well, where is this restaurant? Where are they? And my goal is to try to make it as secretive as possible, because I don't want you to know where it is, because I don't want you to say, well, all they're doing is cooking that same stuff out of Ruth's kitchen. Well, we are. We came up with a new menu. We're trying to reutilize supply. So my long story longer is that what comes out of this is greatness. What comes out of what we're going through right now, to me as an entrepreneur, is inspiration. It's people figuring out things that it's a new, smarter generation that sees what's going on and figures out how to make things better and greater. And I think at the end of the day, we're all going to be safer at the very end through this, because we're going to figure out how to protect each other and ourselves better, protect our family, protect those that come in to eat in the restaurant, because we've gone through what we're going through right now. Now, it's going to be hard right now, but at the very end of this, there is a light at the end of the tunnel. And that's I'll get off my soapbox now and shut up.
No, I love the inspiration, Scott. That's good.
And it's a good segue into, so now let's get down to like some of the tactical things in our last few minutes here. What are some of the things you guys can suggest to the individual restaurateur or the supply chain or anybody else around like cleanliness, sanitation around food, and those high touch items like ketchup bottles, salt and pepper shakers, the food protection, the cleaning procedures after a customer leaves? Like what is that going to kind of look like on those high touch items? And I know Corey brought up an example of a lot of at least some restaurants looking at getting those little packets of individual servings of salt and pepper. And Corey and I both talked about how we're not really looking forward to that as consumers, of having those that not so great pepper, not so great salt, and those small packets. But there's also a cost associated with that. So what are kind of the things you guys are seeing, or at least some of the suggestions you can maybe give to restaurants when they're thinking about these specific things?
I actually read a piece in Esquire, I'm going to say a week ago, and it was about the Midwest. It was about restaurants in the Midwest and how COVID is going to affect all of these new businesses. Indianapolis, Marion County last year opened, I believe, 67 to 70 new restaurants. I mean, Indianapolis started becoming this kind of hub, and then we have these little spin-offs. You've got Grains and Grill in Fairmount, Indiana. It just these little things that are happening, and I think that there will be some adaptation. Yeah, we're going to have to do the little salt and pepper. We're going to have to do those kinds of things. We run a student-run restaurant at Ivy Tech in the Muncie campus in the new building, and we had to make decisions due to Indiana department, because we're now under the Indiana Health Department. We're no longer under Delaware County. And so we already had to make those decisions because they forced us not to use small ketchup bottles that you can refill and things like that. That was already a forced issue with us. Price wise, it was pennies. It really was. So it was one of those things that we were forced to do. And our customer base didn't mind. They also know that they're kind of coming into, a student-run restaurant, so they already know they're taking their lives into their own hands. So a packet of ketchup does not scare them. Does it take away from ambiance? It may, but this is going to be a new normal anyway. So I think it'll be all right. I think that the biggest thing is we have to come together as communities. We have to support each other. We have to make sure that those mom and pops have as much, when I buy local, somebody just left the house to go get dinner because I refused tonight. I said, absolutely not. And they're going to a local place, ordering local. that has been something that you absolutely have to do. If we don't support our locals, they aren't going to be here. And so supporting them as much, if my bill, let's say, is $25, supporting local, we'll hand them $40. I want them to spread that money to their workers, to their people. They deserve that. They work hard for us to make sure that our students have places to work, and we're going to work hard for them. So I think that those small little items are not very big in the huge scheme of what's going on.
Are there concerns from the group about the supply chain around that? Because the availability of those packets and things could become an issue, as some packing facilities and in Indiana we have Red Gold. Are they going to be ready to supply that many ketchup packets? Are they going to be able to spend in that direction?
Yeah. I bet they've thought about that. I'm sure that they've thought about that.
They're thinking about it, but I've been in their plant, and that's a lot. That's a lot of. It's going to require some major tooling changeovers, and their production lines are based upon bulk ketchup. So Heinz, Red Gold, all those. That's going to be, again, the supply chain is going to be somewhat disrupted. Maybe Matt, you can maybe speak to some of that a little bit.
They'll go where the money is. So if the demand goes from bottles to PPEs or PPKs or pillow packs or single serves, that's where they're going to go. That's where the market is, and the equipment will follow. I think that a lot of people ask me about the food chain. I think the food chain is a very resilient business chain. They'll figure it out. Like I said before, it's the market. They've got the equipment. They've got a lot of the capital. It's just a matter of switching over some of the machinery and buying some material. So it might take them a couple months, but if that's what's going to be demanded, they'll figure it out. We're a country that switched over from glass to plastic in our drinks. So if that's the best packaging, or if that's what consumers demand, or if that's what the food service customers demand, they'll figure it out.
Yeah, and like
I wouldn't be surprised to see salsa in pillow packs.
They already do. They do.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, I'm not worried about Red Gold. They will figure it out in a hurry, but it will take a little bit of time, I think, as the demand changes.
Yeah. What I'm hearing from a lot of people is I think that this is going to give brand China a black eye, if it hasn't already, in that, a lot of these supplies are coming from China. And I think China's really shown some unfavorable colors over the last couple of months with this whole scenario. I think there'll be a reset in a lot of supply chains where they'll be pushing away from China. And the reason I bring up China for the food chain is not necessarily the food itself. It's for the packaging. It's for the equipment. So, ultimately, China's a valuable player because they're so cheap. But if we need a change in our food packaging, and it's going to be literally a matter of life and death, it could be a good opportunity for a lot of companies, something like this.
I absolutely agree with that statement.
Yeah, this is Jody Ellett, and I would also agree with that, because the school food service, I was on a call with folks who can't get enough packaging to send school lunches home because everything has to be packaged. And so some of those conversations probably need to happen now for some of the packaging manufacturers in Indiana, just to enable increased packaging availability for restaurants and institutions when they start to open.
Clayton, are you still on?
Yeah, I'm here. I signed on a little bit late, so I missed the introduction part. I was in a meeting with the ITOBA, the Indiana Thoroughbred Breeders Association. So it's one after another.
Yeah, that sounds like a fun meeting, to be honest with you. So, yeah, you work with a lot of businesses in Madison County as the chamber president over there. We have Scott Wise on here, Matt, others who've had their own businesses But what are you hearing from some of the restaurants in Madison County? Maybe it did some different perspective or some things that they're concerned with. Obviously, you and I talked the other day about just their getting their money through the SBA loans and the PPP loans and those things. But anything else that you're hearing and things that we might have missed so far in this conversation, Clayton?
I mean, the main takeaway that I'm hearing is even if we open things right now, that's not going to help our restaurants because consumer confidence is so low. We have no way to prove without additional testing, whether that be testing for antibodies or just a robust drive-through testing system to where we can get the entire population tested. But just consumer confidence is so low because we don't know how widespread the virus actually is. And I think that has to be a pivotal part before we're ever talking about what can reopen.
Yeah, definitely. So along with that, so I think, Scott and Heather, you might be able to give more advice around this, but with there's still a good contingency of restaurants who maybe could be serving food during this time, but they're waiting this out. And what would be your suggestion to them, or ways that they could kind of look at their business and as far as planning out, are they going to open early and try to change their model, or wait it out? I mean, I know you can't give a definitive answer to all restaurant types, but as if someone was approaching you and saying, we could do it, but we just haven't yet, what would be your suggestion to them?
I think that the ones that have decided it, well, I mean, a lot of it comes down to just an economic model. We did ours and we said that if we can produce, X dollars per week, then we know that, we will ultimately lose less money being open than we would lose more money being closed. And that's kind of the decision. I mean, you can layer on top of that to say you also can keep some of your key people employed and hope that they don't leave and not come back. And that was definitely part of our planning process. But unfortunately, what I think you're going to see is a lot of restaurants that have closed, and I've already heard this from several local and bigger chains, that it's just not going to be even economically feasible for them to reopen because they're going to be behind in rent and utilities and loan payments. Just because business stops, unfortunately, none of those other things do stop. You still have to make your payments on certain things. I mean, some people have, some of the business out there, Comcast, I know that we've gone to any smart restaurateur has analyzed every single one of their line items on the P&L and said, is this something that I can reduce not having to get done right now? Do I need less linens in the restaurant, or do I need to have my exhaust hoods cleaned as often because now we're not cooking as often? So there's all kinds of things that we had to go through personally. So unfortunately, though, there's just certain things that you still have to pay. And I've already heard that this was for restaurants that were so thin on cash flow anyway, that you take us out of sales for 4 weeks, 6 weeks, 8 weeks. That doesn't leave any cash left to get the doors back open because of the things that you're going to have to do to restock all of your inventory, to get all those initial purchases made. You're going to have to come out of pocket just to provide for those. Or do you need to retrain a staff? For example, we're getting ready to open here where, well, I hope that we're getting ready to reopen, and we're going to have patios that are back open. Well, typically during patio season, we double the size of our staff because we have to have more people to handle both inside and outside. Now, granted, this could look completely different now because inside might be half the size of what it used to be from a table standpoint. So there's just going to be all kinds of things from that cost standpoint that for me, it's not a question of are they going to reopen and what does that look like? It's more of, are they going to even be able to reopen and open the restaurant back up open to the public? And I'm afraid that we're going to lose a lot of good restaurateurs because of what we're going through. I don't think they're going to be able to reopen.
I'm going to agree with that, and I've talked to quite a bit of local people. Scott, we've met before, but I do know there's a restaurant that's in downtown Muncie, and I talked to the gentleman that owned it, and it's so funny because this is not funny, excuse me. It's ironic. 22 years ago, they were only doing catering out of their kitchen. And it's almost interesting that 22 years later, they are only doing carry out through their kitchen. And it just kind of shows you that, and they have only 2 full-time employees working. They had to lay off their staff, all of these things. But I said, why are you still doing it? Just, I was curious. And because if they closed, it would have been the end. Whereas it was less expensive for them to stay open with this limited staff than it was to shut it all down. Because they would not, just as Scott said, it would be almost impossible to pull out that kind of capital to reopen. And that's the scary part of the entire thing. Yep. Is it's just massive.
A lot of the smaller businesses that I consult, they have some incorrect assumptions. One of them being like, if they don't pay their rent, then when we do begin the phased rollout, then their rent will like suddenly come back on, but they won't owe what was past. We didn't freeze our economy. So, a lot of people, I wouldn't say a lot, but I'd say there's enough of them to be alarming to me that there are restaurants and there are small retailers and other groups that think that is the scenario. And really, like Scott said, the bills still keep coming. That we have not frozen our economy. That is not the way the United States did it. In some cases, your landlord or somebody else might be pushing off your payments, adding them at the end, or they're going to say, hey, now that we're back open again, I want my rent as well as all my past rent now. Right? And so that's something that I try to keep putting out there, but I also want to make sure that we mention it in this call to those restaurateurs who maybe aren't aware of that or haven't talked with their landlords yet. I would say call your landlord should have been the first calls that you made, but there's a lot of people that haven't made those calls yet.
Nothing in the world is free. There is no free lunch. And that's what it comes down to. There is no free lunch. Those bills don't stop. Unfortunately, there is a massive amount of misinformation. There's just a massive amount of it. It's not just here in our industry, it's everywhere. Yep. And, I agree with several things that have been said about mass testing. And until we have mass testing and we know what we're dealing with, we are all kind of sitting here on these calls. This is what we're doing, is we're preparing. How long the preparation is going to go, I don't know. I don't think any of us do. But if they have not yet stopped the bleeding, it's not positive. Definitely.
Yeah. So if there's no other comments around that, then let's go back into like those mitigation steps. So is there any suggestions that you have, anyone in the group has about like how we handle seating capacity or utilizations of new technology, or are we going to be taking the temperatures of customers that come in? We kind of touched on that earlier, but then also, what is it going to look like when an outside vendor, such as Sean's business, when that vendor comes in after you've already tested everyone in the facility and you've cleaned your kitchen, and then a vendor comes in to fix, the hood. What do you do then? What are some of the suggestions that you may all have, or what are the concerns that you have?
Shane, are you aware of any guidance from NRA, National Restaurant Association, or any of the trade groups that can offer signage or training to the restaurants? I know we're talking as a group, but I got to think that a major trade association somewhere could offer signage or procedures. The other thing I would recommend or think about is some type of third-party verification, whether it be a Primus or some other type of lab, Ecolab or Cintas or any of these other people that come in and can provide some type of a third-party verification that the facility's been cleaned, that they've got proper PPE. Any type of third-party verification, I think, would be a good thing at this point, because everybody can say they're clean, but who's going to decide what is clean?
Yeah,
I know
I
that
can
the NRA chair was talking about formulating new guidelines with regard to that, but I haven't seen those come out, Matt. Yeah, he knows that he may be a little bit behind the eight ball on getting that information out, but that is a plan of theirs to put forward.
I was on a call with the NRAEF 2 days ago, so I don't even know what day that was. Was that Monday? Yeah, no, I'm sorry, Friday. And yeah, they're way behind the eight ball actually, because we are having significant problem with testing, ServSafe testing, any NRAF certification testing. They finally released the managed first testing to be able to be done virtually. We are still fighting the ServSafe to be able to be done virtually. Because it's going to have a domino effect not only in our industry with renewing certifications, because it's something you have to have in the state of Indiana anyway. But in the education realm, we are going to have to give thousands of incomplete grades, which will then make them domino into not being able to continue classes. They are absolutely frozen at the moment, trying to figure out what they're going to do. We did finally get managed first push through. They are going to make they're doing some meetings this week and they're going to make a decision about ServSafe. They said by the last week of the month. And it was brought up in that phone call about signage, about what should we do? Because, we follow what their guidelines are. Their guidelines are very much in the restaurant industry. And I think that caught them off guard. I really do. I think they were seriously caught off guard. So I do know that it has been brought to their attention, but I don't think that, I think they're trying to staunch the flow. They're hemorrhaging. I think that they're overwhelmed because everyone is calling and asking.
And then regarding the outside vendors and maintenance, and you talk specifically about hoods, that's going to be a major concern because no one wants to come in and then have a big fire because they didn't maintain their equipment. But what we're also seeing is a real focus on indoor air quality. And this is something that we haven't brought up in this conversation. But the typical design of a hood system is to exhaust out of the hood and provide makeup air at the hood. But what you're seeing with indoor air quality is facilitating 100% outside air to come into the dining room and kitchen through a dedicated outdoor air system that conditions the air, dehumidifies the air, but flushes the entire facility. And also maintains something that most restaurants don't, and that's positive pressure in the facility because you don't want to be sucking in contaminants. You want to be blowing out contaminants. So we specialize in that end of the industry with the dedicated outdoor air system. We provided a lot of that equipment within just a week's notice for the COVID-19 healthcare facilities that were coming up, but it's a big deal when it comes to restaurants. The minimum for restaurants is that they'll need to service their HVAC, make sure their RTUs aren't caked with grease and that they'll actually function, that they're just RTUs are just recirculating stale air. Well, that's an issue when it comes to health. So the more fresh air you can have come in, the better. If RTUs need to be replaced, you'd put a dedicated outdoor air system in place of the RTU, and then you'd be facilitating more of a high indoor air quality as a result.
That's excellent. So as we get down to our final few minutes here, so let's make the assumption that the stretch goal that Corey and I have is that this makes it to the governor's office and to the governor of other of the states around us, since they are working in concert. He has said that he's asked for feedback from 17 different segments of the economy by Wednesday. So if we get this out quick enough and if we get this in front of them, what is something do you want to make sure that he is considering when we're talking specifically about the food service industry and the whole supply chain? Is there anything you guys want to really push out there?
Any type of third-party verification. whether it comes from the state or they can recommend somebody or recommend best practices, because everybody's going to have these questions, and the state would do really well to stay ahead of it.
A lot of head nods on that one. Yeah.
Well,
Yeah, I agree with
this
Matt. I think that going back to Jody's point on the testing too, you're going to have some sort of form of approach to make people comfortable to go back into the environments. And then I was thinking through the regional city grant approach of facade grants or change grants within the restaurant business statewide, thinking that through. I don't know what that would look like, but need to be some sort of grand relocalization around both the supply chain and the restaurant spaces to re-energize them.
Yeah, this is Jody again. I would read what we're facing with farmers markets is home rule by the county health departments and sort of the high variability among county health departments as to how prepared they are to allow farmers markets. Now, of course, they're different because they're an event and considered a gathering rather than, even though the governor declared them as a necessary food outlet. And then also along with that sort of, well, I'll come back to that. Go ahead.
That's definitely.
Sorry,
I'm
reconnecting
glad
the
you brought
supply
up the farmers markets. We did invite somebody. They were not able to make it. They're very busy right now, trying to plan how they're gonna possibly open soon. But I'm glad you brought that up because that's another segment that is could be easily forgotten.
Yeah, and I think reconnecting those local supply chains, we have a serious lack of infrastructure for processing in this state. So the idea of, increasing the amount of local food supply to instill further resilience into our local supply chain of food is going to need necessary infrastructure investment. So whether it's meat processing or dairy processing in a mid-sized scale, processing that restaurants are used to purchasing for food service, those sorts of things are really going to need to be thought of at a statewide level and be a little more strategic so that we can reinvigorate not only our restaurant food sector, but the farming sector to supply the food that we want to eat.
I just want to comment on, agree with Jody's point about farmers markets. Here locally in Madison County, I've worked with several of them, and they are really taking stride to try to figure out how to make the structure work, especially incorporating or trying to work with the local health department to making sure that they're following the home rule standards. I do agree with that even though, the state level is trying to give them guidance, that home rule is really taking over and can really vary between counties, especially if you're working with vendors that are crossing counties in order to sell at multiple markets. So I think that is going to be a need to have some more clarity on the structure that they're needing across the state.
And I'm just going to ask this since Scott, do you want the last word?
You know what, I was trying to rack my brain to shut my mouth, and there's really not anything that anyone else has said or we haven't already said on the call to say what I ask you to put in front of the governor that we haven't already talked about. I think most importantly is that we want the health and safety of all of our own people as well as the people that we're serving. And, we want to do it the right way. And what does that entail? I mean, it entails everything we've already talked about, proper testing and opening the right way and being able to make the proper adjustments. But at the end of the day, I mean, for me, for an entrepreneur, for a guy that's running a restaurant right now, I would say, and if I was speaking to the governor on behalf of all mom and pops, I would say that we've got to, and I don't have the answer, but I would say that we have to figure out how do we help these people get open for business and get their feet back on the ground stably so that they can get back to doing what they do and they do well. what we're going through right now, I've read a couple articles where it says it's going to expose those people that were either on the cusp of bankruptcy because they didn't have enough cash flow, or they just weren't running a very good restaurant very well. They weren't taking care of their people. They weren't innovating properly. They weren't serving hot food fast or giving good customer service, all the things that happen within our four walls. It's going to expose those groups of people, but it's also going to unfortunately expose the people that were doing a good job. They just got caught in a trap. Not a trap, it wasn't their fault. And it's sad to know that there are going to be so many people that are going to get hurt by something that truly was not their doing. And I don't know what the right answer is. I don't know, as we've said, there's so many different layers to this besides the supply chain. I can't get mad at my landlord for asking me to pay my rent because they've got most of them have a mortgage to pay. Are there ways around it? Can they squeeze their profitability down lower to help us? Most of them will do that. And I don't know, that's where I think the government has to be aggressive, if at all possible. And a lot of times, unfortunately, governments don't understand entrepreneurship. They don't understand business. Some do, but some don't. And that's to me the squeeze, is that if you want to find the place that tries to get a lot of us on solid ground and out of where we are and to help the mom and pops, they've got to figure that hard question out. And I unfortunately don't have the answer.
So on behalf of myself, as we get to this last thing, I'm so appreciative of all of you jumping on here, and I hope that this does make an impact and something that is helpful. I think we discussed some really pressing matters, and I think we threw out some suggestions that are not very common to hear, and may not be discussed in a lot of circles. But then also, I think we kind of highlighted those things that are being discussed in those circles and condensed them down into this brief call. So thank you, Ella, for joining. I want to make sure that Corey has the impetus, as well as Sean. Corey, thank you so much for asking me to be a part of this. And I want to let you close it out.
Thank you, Shane. And I appreciate everybody being on the call and sharing their knowledge and expertise on a very complex problem. And our goal is, again, to have this posted online for other restaurants to learn from. Like I said, potentially share it with the governor. And so your time and interest in this topic is very much appreciated. And if you're interested in additional follow-ups or to be able to share contact information, please email Shane and I, and we'll make sure that we can get you the appropriate follow-up contact information from somebody that might have been on the call that you'd like to learn from. So, if somebody wants to talk to Matt a little bit more about supply chain and have some questions, or Chef Heather about students and what they can do to help, we'd love to get you in contact with each other. I think that's it.
Thanks, everybody. I apologize for talking so much, but thank you for having me on the call.
We're glad you're on the call.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Everybody.
Appreciate it.
Bye.